In this video, we're going to talk about apartment buildings and are they as good as people are telling us they are? Make sure you stick around to the end of the video because if making money is something that interests you, you will really love this video. So when we talk about apartment buildings, I'm thinking of two things. Really, there's really two important strategies in apartment buildings as if you're going to keep them like that without demolishing them and building something else. One of them is to basically do the turnkey model, which is buying the property and then just using the rent and then maybe do some minor adjustments to the rent as you go. And maybe tweaking the operating expenses. The other option is to do value add. So let's talk about the turnkey rental, the turnkey apartment building first. So this is obviously a great way to build wealth, right? So you have a well-positioned building, it's cash flowing, I'm assuming, and then if you're thinking very long-term, like 20 years, 30 years, or even multi-generational, this is a great way to put your money in there. It's going to build a solid equity and it's providing cash flow. So this is a solid investment. The returns, on the other hand, are not as attractive as some other investments if you're more active. This is a passive type of investment. This is pretty good. If you want to work harder, everybody knows that you can make a higher return. But if you're happy to be cruising around and doing a pretty decent return, then turnkey apartment buildings are very solid investments. So why would you buy a turnkey apartment building? So one of them obviously is that if you are in a 1031 exchange, you have a lot of money that you have to invest in a short period of time. It's going to be very hard to do that with like single family rentals, for example. If you have to go all of a sudden and buy $1 million worth of single family rentals. It's going to be a little bit challenging. But if you have an apartment building, it's pretty easy to place $1 million in an apartment building if you can find it. But if it's turnkey, you're going to have a lot of opportunities to do that. The other thing too is that the turnkey apartment building is great for multi-generational wealth. So if you're thinking long term, you want to put your money, park your money somewhere and for the long term, and it's going to pay the building for itself, it's going to have a good appreciation and all of that, then this is a great investment, great solid investment, hard asset that's going to generate great wealth for your family. The other advantage to these apartment buildings is that you typically get a commercial loan. If you're above 4 units, you would get a commercial loan to finance your property. So these loans have a lot of different special characteristics that you're not going to see on the residential side of it. First of all, the value of the loan is a little bit different on how it's calculated. Also, a lot of these commercial loans, they don't depend on your W-2 to determine if they're going to give you the loan. They're looking at the building, the intrinsic properties, the P&L of that building to determine if the building can afford to pay for the mortgage. So this is a critical component here. You pay a little bit more in terms of the down payment, the interest rate is a little bit higher, but it's really worth it to be able to get into the apartment building. If you just look at me, I have multiple apartment buildings. I have like 5 apartment buildings in Memphis. I have no problems getting a loan on these buildings, but I cannot get a loan on a single family rentals. So this is pretty interesting because I don't have a straight up W-2. My income tax is pretty complicated, and then the bank just don't want to deal with that kind of reading of income tax that are 1,000 pages long. For these reasons, commercial loans are much better, and these apartment buildings, turnkey apartment buildings, are great for that reason. Another advantage also is that some of these commercial loans are accessible with non-recourse clause. So that means that you are not responsible if the building, for some reason, something happened and it cannot pay for the mortgage anymore. The bank, the financial institution that lent you the money, cannot go after you personally to reclaim the debt. So this is a great advantage to protect your own personal assets, your other investments as well. Sometimes you have to do a personal guarantee for certain things, but in general, non-recourse loans, these are a great advantage with the commercial loans, something that you're not going to see on the residential side. And sometimes, even though they're turnkey rental business, there are some opportunities for value add. You can still slightly increase the rent. You can improve the curb appeal slightly with minimum investments. You can also provide additional services, let's say Wi-Fi for everybody. You can also, if you don't have separate meters for each of the tenants, you can also use a service to basically split up the cost of the utilities to each of the tenant and add that to their bill for the month as part of their lease. All these things would improve the revenue of the building. You can also do the same thing and tweak the expenses of the building, and so that would really improve the NOI, the net operating income for that building, therefore increasing its value. Sometimes there's also some minor renovations that you can do to again increase the value, get higher rent, etc. The next aspect of the apartment building is the value add. Obviously, is to find the highest and best value for the building, and it requires to have the right team on the ground, obviously, to do that. So not only the property management company that is able to really navigate through the renovation process and keep some of the tenants happy, negotiating some of the tenants to leave so that you can do the renovations, and also having the right contractors to do the work on the property. This is really similar to something that's called the BRRRR strategy on the residential space, which is to buy a single family home, renovate it, rent it out, refinance it, and repeat. So this is what's called the BRRRR strategy. But this value add apartment building is really BRRRR on steroids, because now you're dealing with much bigger value asset. Sometimes you can get something that's called a bridge financing for these loans. If you can also do sometimes a regular commercial loan for this, as long as they have already good tenant in place and you don't have an intention to get rid of all the tenants. So there are some loans available for these types of projects. The nice thing about it, as I mentioned earlier, you don't need your W-2. It's really about the project itself and how it's going to be managed and how much revenue is bringing in. When we talk about these value add, what's important is that how do we increase the value of a commercial building? I mentioned in another video that the value of a building is determined by its net operating income and the cap rate for the neighborhood or comparable buildings in the area. The cap rate is calculated by dividing the net operating income by the value of the building, but when you compare that cap rate around with other buildings that were sold recently, that gives you an indication of kind of like the quality of the revenue in the neighborhood for that kind of building. So if you have $100,000 in net operating income and the cap rate in the area that you're in is 10%, then the value of your building is then $1 million, basically. It also gives you a sense that if you increase the net operating income, if you are able to do some renovations, find new tenants, and then bring the rent up, reduce the expenses, and to basically increase the net operating income, let's say by $10,000 with a 10% cap rate, that means that now you've added $100,000 in value for that particular building. So this is how you add value to the building. So that cap rate is really a very strong multiplier, has a multiplier effect on the net operating income. So the more you can do on the net operating income, the better. You also have to make sure that your renovation costs are in line, are giving you a higher return than the cap rate. So that way it's generating higher net operating income based on the additional cost of the renovation. As long as you keep that in mind, you can really add a tremendous amount of value to your apartment building. Something that you can't really do in a residential space. The residential space typically is is governed and evaluated and appraised by comparable sales. So they're looking at similar houses, whether they were rented or owner occupied, and that's just basically how they determine the value of the building. They just look at similar houses, what they were sold for, and that gives you the value. So it doesn't matter if a single family home was rented for $5,000 a month or $100 a month, it has the same value on the residential side. On the commercial side, if all your units are $5,000 versus $100 a month, it makes a tremendous difference in terms of the value of the building. Now the question is, should you consider investing in apartment buildings? And the short answer is yes, you should definitely consider it. If you're looking for long-term wealth building, then select turnkey apartment buildings, because with minimum amount of time, it's going to be very easy for you to invest in an apartment building and generate some passive income and generate wealth for the future generations. If you have more time and you want to have a more active type of investment, then a value-add apartment building is a great way to quickly increase your capital and have great returns on your investment. Just because of that cap rate as a factor of your net operating income, it dramatically increases the value of the building, and if you do it right, you can easily double your money in a year, 12 months or 24 months that you operate and renovate a building. Something that you can't do really in residential space. With the value-add apartment building, they have you have to have the right team on the ground. You have to have the right construction team, the right property management team. You really have to understand your market. You also have to understand kind of like the rent that you can get for that particular renovation. What is the level of finish that you need to get to in order to maximize your rent? Do you have the right marketing campaigns to attract the right people there? How's the neighborhood looking, etc.? There's a lot of different components. There's a more risk involved in that particular thing, but in that particular type of investment, but it could be worth it considering the high level of return that you can get after you sell that apartment building. Also, apartment buildings require a lot more money. So not only you have to put more money down, but you have to put more money down on a higher asset price. So right there, it requires a lot of money. The fees for the commercial loans are significantly higher, and everything costs more. I mean, even the HVAC units and all of that, some of them are the commercial grade HVAC unit. They cost a lot more money. The person that comes and fixes it charges more because you have an apartment building instead of a single family home. So it just keeps adding up. In the end, all these costs, you have to keep track of all these costs, but in the end, if you increase the net operating income significantly, then all these costs are going to be covered and you're going to have a great looking building that has a great value. If you want to do value-add apartment building, it's also going to require more time on your part. It's going to be harder unless you pay somebody. It's going to be harder to just kind of let one contractor go and do everything or whatever. You have to be there, not necessarily be there present, but you have to be involved on a regular basis with the property management, with the contractors, with all kinds of different players that are involved in the building. So this is going to be a critical component to your success. It's not something that you can easily kind of like let that happen and let somebody else handle. So you have to show that you're really committed to the projects and then visit it on a regular basis so that they know how important it is to you. So part of that time too is going to be about coordinating the different effort. I mean, you may have to be involved in some aspects of the communication to the tenants, maybe some buying appliances and stuff like that. Monitoring progress and tracking progress is very important. And then the quality is also something that's very important. Whenever we do our apartment buildings, we always test the market. We always do one unit the way we think it should be done for the market. We have an idea of what the market rent is for that unit for a 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom apartment. And then what happens is that we say, well, this is kind of like what's going on around there. In order to get that rent, this is the level of finish that we need to do. And then we're going to do one unit at that rate. We're going to also finish all the exterior as well, so that the apartment, the building has a good curb appeal and it looks good and clean. And then we have our demo unit, and this is the one that we're going to try to market. If we can get our rent easily for that particular unit with that new renovation, then we're going to go and we're going to do the rest of the apartment building that way. So this is how we test the market. Often it works great, but every once in a while it doesn't quite work that way. So we had some apartment building, for example, where we thought we'd be able to spend $10,000 to $15,000 to renovate a unit. The cost of the renovation was $25,000. So we went on one of the units all in at $25,000 in renovation, but the rent increase couldn't justify spending that kind of money on the renovations. So we had to come up with an alternative budget, and we basically kind of cut that down to, I think it was like $5,000 or $6,000 per unit, to just kind of clean it up, renovate it, and change the appliances, etc., and increase the rent. And then it made sense. It made financial sense to renovate the building that way. So you have to look at these numbers and make these decisions. This is not something that the people on the ground can do on their own. So tracking progress, tracking the finances, and making sure that this is all aligned towards your goal. If you're not used to having any kind of rental property, single family rental or whatever, apartment building may not be the first investment you want to go into. I would recommend that you first start, and this is when I talk to new investors in the rental space, I recommend that they start with single family rentals, turnkey single family rentals, and then they kind of move their way up into more complex kind of investments. Get your feet wet on the turnkey single family rentals. See if you like to be a landlord and have tenants, and then seeing the owner statement and stuff like that, and see how you feel about that, and having delayed rent and all that kind of stuff. And then you can move on to, you know, maybe more single family rentals, and maybe you can do a single family burr, and then you can look at apartment buildings. Make sure that it kind of fits with your lifestyle and your personality. You don't want to be, if these single family rentals stresses you out, then it's probably not, apartment building is not going to help you in that point. So try out with the single family rentals, and if you enjoy that, you think it's a great investment, you can always move up to the apartment building or just add an apartment building to your portfolio. Try it out with the single family rentals first, and then decide how you want to move and progress. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions or you want to run anything by me with respect to real estate, whether you want to invest in an apartment building, turnkey single family rentals, or you're interested in BRRRR strategy, you want to know more, feel free to contact me. But no matter what, if you like this video, make sure you click the thumbs up to help that YouTube algorithm actually distribute my video to a broader audience. If you're interested in real estate investing in general, or entrepreneurship, financial freedom, early retirement, feel free to watch the rest of the videos on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe and click that little notification bell so that you are notified whenever a new video is published. Thank you.